everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. So today I'm coming to you with my wrap up for January. It is already a month into the year. Can't believe that this much time has already passed, but I'm kind of ready for next month. So I did a decent amount of reading. I didn't get to all of my TBR, so I'm gonna go through that for you. But I read a total of 5 books. I'll tell you all my thoughts on them. A couple of them were kind of unexpected reads, so I think this will be a lot of fun. So first I thought I would go over the books that I didn't get to on my TBRs. So one of the books on my TBR was 1,000 Beginnings and Endings. It's an anthology of like Asian mythology retellings, and it's edited by Ellen O and Elsie Chapman. So I actually started reading this. I read like 2 stories in it, but I did not get around to finishing it, so I'm still currently reading this. I'm also still currently reading My Lady Jane. This was not on my January TBR, but I was reading it at the end of 2019, and I still haven't gotten around to like finishing it, but I'm like really enjoying it. It's just like I keep picking up other books, and so this one just keeps going unfinished, but I have like about half of it left, and I'm really loving this. And then the other book that was on my TBR that I haven't gotten around to nor finished is Kingdom of Souls by Raina Barron. I am also about halfway through this. It was really great. Recommended it in my Epic Book Recs video, so I'm hoping to finish this very soon as well. But I think I kind of overloaded my TBR with fantasy books, and so at some point I was just like, oh my god, I need a little breather and to read something a little shorter and less dense. And then the last book on my TBR that I did not get to is Circe by Madeline Miller. I've been meaning to read this for the longest time, but I put it on my TBR because I was hoping to read it, but I feel like I just wasn't in the mood for it, so I never ended up like actually picking it up. So I don't know when I'll get to this, but hopefully soon. I don't really have much to say this. Like, I know it's good. I like have great high expectations for this. I just can't seem to muster the energy to pick it up. And then the other 2 books on my TBR that I did not get to are A Phoenix First Must Burn. This is a collection of Black Girl Magic stories. I decided I was gonna move this to my February TBR, so if you haven't seen that, go check it out. But I decided that it would make more sense to read it during Black History Month as well, and also I just didn't have the time to end up picking it up, so I'm hoping to read it in February, but I do think it's gonna be awesome. And then the last book that I didn't get to on my TBR is Infinity Sun by Adam Silvera, and I was really excited to read this, and then a bunch of reviews started coming in as soon as it released, and it didn't seem like a lot of people were enjoying it. And me personally, I started reading it like a few chapters and I wasn't really feeling it, so I just kind of stopped reading. I'm not gonna officially call this a DNF, but I just don't think I would feel like reading it right now. Maybe I'll pick it up later. Maybe when the second book comes out and people are really enjoying that, I might decide to pick this up in general, but yeah, just not really feeling it. I'm trying not to read too many books that I don't think I will enjoy from the get-go, so yeah. And then the other book that I'm in the middle of reading, this is not on my February TBR, but I will probably finish it in February. I'm like halfway through and I absolutely love it. And that is In Order to Live by Yeonmi Park. So this is a memoir. It is about a girl who was born in North Korea and she escapes to China and goes through some really crazy hardship, and then eventually escapes to South Korea with her mother. But this is like one of the most harrowing stories to read. She really gives you like a deep insight into North Korean life, which was something that I like had taken history classes about, but like it's different to get like a first-hand account of that. So super interesting. I am about, I think, yeah, I'm about 100 pages in and it's only like 250 pages. Really enjoying this as like a read, as in like it is very thought-provoking and interesting, but obviously this is like a really sad story to read about, so I like hesitate to say I'm like enjoying reading about her, you know, very terrible life, but yes. Okay, so now I'm gonna actually tell you about the books I did read. There are way less of these than the books that I didn't read, but regardless, first book that I read in January is Helium by Rudy Francisco. So this is a poetry collection. I had heard a lot of people kind of recommend this to me, and I love poetry, so I was really excited about that. And I do know that the author is California based, and he is also a spoken word artist, so there's like that element to the poetry as well. I really, really loved it. I got it as a gift for Christmas, and so it was just really nice to just kind of sit down with a short little poetry book and read it as my first read for the year, and I like kicked my Goodreads goal with this book. But this collection is kind of split into different sections, and each section kind of covers different themes, I would say, or have a different vibe to them. So the first section is more like uplifting motivational poems, and then the later sections get more political and have more social critique. But I just really, really enjoyed the whole thing. I thought he had some really interesting and wonderful things to say, and I'm just gonna read you one of the poems because I just loved it so much. So this is about writing poetry. So it's called Museum. No one ever asks a museum if it's doing okay. So when you choose to spill like this, bleed like this, cry like this, your pain becomes an exhibit. You hang your trauma on the wall, ask patrons not to touch, but only half of them respect the signs. When you choose to be a poet, you become a place that people walk through and then leave when they're ready. I really love that one. And then this is another one that I really enjoyed, so it's called To You. He puts guilt in the air and waits for you to breathe, tries to tailor the blame until it looks like it fits you, turns the story into a gymnast and convinces it to flip. He rewinds the movie, excavates the plot, digs out your patience, makes himself the narrator and the hero. He sketches you as the antagonist, and suddenly his transgressions become deleted scenes. He blames you for his sadness. And this is how the wolf cries boy. Okay, this is the last one I'm gonna read, but it's called Page and it's very short. It just sits there with a mouth full of entitlement, staring at you and wondering why it's still not a masterpiece. Really love so many poems in this. I definitely think it's a great one if you wanted a poetry book to read. The next book that I finished in January is The Tiger at Midnight by Swati Thirdala. I was so surprised by this book. I had been meaning to read it for a really long time. I had gotten it last year, like mid last year. I even interviewed the author at BookCon last year, which was really fun and she was super nice. And I was really excited about this because it was an Indian inspired fantasy and it involves like some Hindu mythology as well. And so I was just really excited about that aspect, but I never ended up actually like reading past, I think, the first chapter. I had picked it up, but never got past that. And so finally I decided to pick it up. I put on my TBR and I was like, I'm gonna read this. And I actually started reading it on my e-reader because I got a $2.99 copy. So I started reading on there and it actually kind of really helped my reading flow. And so it was just so great. I was reading it on my commutes to work and it was just so much fun. I absolutely loved it. So it follows two different main characters, Isha and Kunal, and it's set in this world where there are these two neighboring kingdoms and the royal families were originally related, but in one of the countries there was a coup, and so a general kind of like took over that country and turned it very militarized and kind of more patriarchal as well. And so that's the country that Kunal comes from, and he's a soldier there that works at the Blood Fort. And Isha is from the other neighboring country called Dharka, and she is a rebel assassin in this rebel group, and she ends up traveling to Jhansi, to the Blood Fort, to murder the general at the Blood Fort. He's not like the ruler of the country, but like one of the top officials, and he also happens to be Kunal's uncle, which is also interesting. And so Kunal and Isha kind of meet at the Blood Fort, but he doesn't know that she's the assassin, and so that kind of thing happens. And then when the general dies, Kunal along with some other soldiers are sent on a mission to find this assassin called the Viper. Isha is the Viper, and bring them to justice, and whoever can bring back the Viper will be named commander of the Blood Fort and kind of gain all this power. And so Kunal kind of feels like he owes it to his uncle to avenge his death, and so he goes looking for this Viper, and along the way he ends up running into Isha as she is also leaving Jhansi, and it becomes this kind of cat and mouse game where at first like they don't really know who the other person is. Even when they do, they're kind of running from each other or running after each other, and so there's a lot of like really interesting near misses in this book, and I just really enjoyed it in general. I felt like the dynamic between the two main characters was really great and I just loved them. Kunal is kind of that character, that soldier character, that very loyal character who is questioning his beliefs, and Isha was just so interesting. She was so badass and she was just a really fun and hilarious character as well. Like I think she was super funny and she was always kind of poking fun at Kunal as well, and the romance that develops between them was just super great. And I also just really loved the world that she creates as well in this book. So yeah, I'm like super excited for the second book that's coming out. It's called The Archer at Dawn. Yeah, I just can't wait for it, and I just really want to know what happens because there's like some big events that are going to happen in the second book that are kind of alluded to in the first book, so I'm excited about that. And I do believe it's a trilogy, so I really recommend this if you wanted a new fantasy to read because it was awesome. Alright, the next book that I finished in January was Criers War by Nina Varela. So this took me a while to read. I did start this like quite a few months ago, and I got about 50 pages in at one point and kind of stopped reading, and then I got like 100 pages in and stopped reading, and so it took me a while to read this. I will say I enjoyed this. I think by the end I did like enjoy it and feel like it was worth reading. It definitely wasn't as good as I was hoping it would be. This is basically a fantasy and it involves like artificial humans called automata, and the automata were kind of created by alchemy and kind of magic, and then after they were created they took over the human race and subjugated them, and so now they are the ruling class. And so one of the main characters is a human whose family was kind of murdered by all these automata, and then the other main character is Crier, who is the daughter of like the leader of the country, and she is an automata. And at the beginning of the book she finds out that she has a flaw in her design and that she is more passionate than regular automata, and that she might be prone to being more like a human, and so she's very scared about this. And then our other main character, Isla, who is the human, is determined to get revenge for her family's deaths, and so she's trying to infiltrate the palace and kind of get to the top and get to Crier and basically assassinate her or find a way to take down the automata. The thing I didn't really like about this was mostly the parts with Isla and her kind of motivations. I felt like the revenge plot wasn't that interesting nor exciting, and I didn't feel like Isla's motivations were really that interesting, but I absolutely loved the parts with Crier and all of her concerns over her own humanity, because she's trying not to be human, but in that effort she ends up being more human than some of the human characters in this book, and so I absolutely loved those parts. There's also a bit of romance between Isla and Crier. It is a hate to love thing, and it's very, very slow burn, but they do kind of fall for each other, but I think it definitely was more Crier than Isla, and so in that way I sympathized and empathized way more with Crier than with Isla. So it was a really interesting read. I do think I would pick up the next book just to see what happens with Crier, because I just really enjoyed her as a character, but I didn't feel like the world was super fleshed out either, and I didn't really care about Isla or any of her friends either. Not to say that she's a bad character, I just, you know, she wasn't my favorite, but I loved Crier. So yeah, this is a queer fantasy. It involves a female-female relationship, so I absolutely loved that rep as well. And it's also a fantasy world where queerness is very normal, so that was really great, and it wasn't like this queer suffering narrative, so that was awesome. All right, and then the next book that I read was kind of unexpected. I ended up getting a review copy of this, and then I just really wanted to pick it up because the cover and the concept, and that is Given by Nandy Taylor. So this is a book by a Toronto-based author, which I was super excited about, and it is a fantasy. It's an Afro-Caribbean inspired fantasy, and it involves a shape-shifting dragon, which I was super here for, and I also just really love this cover. But basically it follows our main character, Jananie, who has lived on these like tribal lands all her life and has kind of had this sheltered existence. She's this like warrior princess as well, and she has this magic called rune magic, where she draws these runes on her body and can use it to do magical things. And when her father falls ill, she decides to go on this year-long quest. It's like this year-long journey that most of the young people in her tribe do. So for her journey, she decides to go to this other island country called Criers. It's much different from the tribal lands. They have very different magic as well. And so she goes there in the hopes of enrolling in their magical academy to learn their magic and find a way to heal her father when she's back. But in that process, when she goes to enroll in this magical school, it's kind of a very Harry Potter-ish vibe. She ends up meeting this shape-shifting dragon, and he does this thing where he sees her and he's like, "You're my Given, we must be together." And it's this kind of concept of Given, which is like soulmates, like these people who are destined to be together. And so Jananie has never encountered this concept of Given in her tribal lands. Dragons have been gone from the tribal lands for a very long time. So when he tells her this, she's just like, what the fuck? Like, no way, I'm not your Given. Go away. So it's very much a kind of hate to love romance. She's telling him to just like leave for most of the beginning, and then it kind of warms up and it's really cute. So the school and the romance bits of the book were a huge part of the book, but I also just really loved it because it had some really interesting commentary. Jananie is kind of moving from these tribe lands where she's grown up around people who look exactly like her, who know her, who treat her really well. And then she goes to Criers and she starts to face a lot of prejudice and kind of antagonism because she looks different. She's an outsider, she's a foreigner, and so she's facing a lot of kind of xenophobia as well. And one of the things that I thought was super interesting in this book, this might be a little bit of a spoiler, but one of the side characters in the book starts trying to appropriate Jananie's rune magic, and so that was kind of a bit of conflict in the book, and I thought it was just so interesting and so kind of timely for the age that we're in right now. So yeah, I absolutely love this. This is kind of a commentary on race relations like right now as well, so I just really love this a lot. At some points I did feel like the dialogue was a little bit childish, but otherwise the book overall was super great. So definitely recommend if you wanted a new fantasy to read. All right, and then the last book that I finished in January was one that I did not expect I would have a copy of this month, but I was so excited, and the second I got it in the mail, I was like, I have to drop everything and read this. That book is The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. So this is her new book that is coming out in March, at the beginning of March, so I'm not gonna like say too much about this because I don't want to spoil anything before it comes out. But guys, I love this so much. So if you don't know, I absolutely love Marie Lu. I think anyone who has been watching my channel for a while knows she's one of my favorite authors. But the interesting thing about this book is that it is a book that she wrote way before all of her other books. So it's actually the first book that she wrote and the one that she got her agent with. And before she sold Legend as her like debut novel, this is the one that they were trying to get published, but it ended up not working out, and so Legend became her debut novel and her career went from there. And so this book is kind of coming out like 10 years after she originally wrote it, which I thought was so interesting. But basically it is kind of a historical fiction fantasy, and it takes place in I think the 1800s, and it follows the Mozart kids. So if you didn't know, and I didn't know this until a bunch of people on my videos were commenting that this was true, but Mozart, the musician and composer, had a sister, an older sister, who was also a performer, musician, and composer as well, but because of history's kind of look on women, she's just been kind of relegated to the sidelines, and her story has never been really told. And so Marie Lu kind of took this as like historical inspiration and makes it into this story and adds a bit of fantasy elements to it. And the really interesting thing about this is that basically it is telling this girl's story. Her name's Marie Anna, but in the book she's called Nanowrimo. That was like her childhood name. So this book is telling Nanowrimo's story from when she's very young to when she's, I think, in her teens, and then there's like an epilogue as well. And while telling her life story, it kind of describes the relationship between her and her brother, and it's just really, really sweet. But one of the interesting things about this is that the two of them kind of discover this magical world called the Kingdom of Back, and they encounter a guardian from there, and they end up kind of traveling into this world and having their music kind of inspired by this magical world where everything's kind of backwards. But the really cool thing about this whole concept is that I was reading the author's note, and Marie Lu said that she had been going through letters between Mozart and his sister, like historical records and things, and the two of them actually did think up and imagine this fictional world called the Kingdom of Back when they were children, to kind of get them through the long journeys between performances and things. And so I thought that was super interesting. So it is really based on this like true story between these two siblings. I just absolutely love this. It was so well written. It was so magical and lyrical. Marie Lu's writing in this book is definitely a lot more literary, a lot different from her other books. It's written in first person past tense, whereas her usual books are in present tense. And overall, I feel like this is a book that could like be a middle grade book, but also an adult book. Like, it had a lot of crossover potential, and honestly, it's just such a wonderful book. And I honestly think it's become like my favorite Marie Lu book ever, I think. Definitely gonna be on my top 10 favorite books of the year. Yeah, I just kind of devoured it. It is not very long. It's about 300 pages, but like if you see here, I don't know if you can see it, but I like fold the corners on pages with like quotes that I really loved, and there were just so many parts in this book where there were lines that I absolutely loved. And there's just some really interesting like family relationships as well in this book, and I just love so much about it. So I will probably do a full review about this, like a spoilery review, once the book is out. So if you would like to see that, let me know so I can kind of gauge interest. And everyone should just go pick it up when it comes out in March, because it was just amazing and I love it. And I'm definitely gonna go get myself a finished copy because it was just so gorgeous. Yeah. So those are all of the books that I read this month. I feel like I had a pretty good reading month, even though I didn't get to like most of my TBR. I'm totally fine with that. I read like 5 books, so that's all right. But that's about all I have to say. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of the books that I mentioned, or if you're planning to read them. I would love to hear your thoughts. And also let me know what you guys read in January. I would love to hear what you guys have been up to. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and please remember that the story ain't over. Bye!